Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Koritis. Today is Friday, January 8th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast is DC Circus and Job Pain. I think on yesterday's podcast, I announced us as 2020, so my first mistake with the year. Well, at least it was early and not in February or something later. But it is 2021, first Friday of the year, and already a doozy of a week. Again, DC Circus and Job Pain. Being the first Friday of the month, we have the official jobs report for the month of December. I was busy earlier today, so this will actually be the first time I'm really taking a look at it as I read it to the audience. We're going to continue with that little tradition since last year. But first, I do want to talk about the DC Circus. So I guess we have the announcement from President Trump, at least as it stands today, that he will not be attending the inaugural. I think that's a mistake. As I voiced my opinion earlier this week following the debacle and sad day in America when those rioters breached the U.S. Capitol building on Wednesday, I said the president, in a symbol, in a show of unity, he should go to the inaugural address. I know he doesn't want to be there, but he should be to announce to the world, but more specifically and more importantly, announce to the country and to his supporters, especially the most loyal to him, that it's time to settle down. It's time to unite. Now, there are a ton of legitimate grievances, as I have been stating here all week and for months, to protest peacefully, to put the politicians on notice that what they have done, what they continue to do is ridiculous. It's immoral, it's unethical, it's un-American. The feigned outrage that they gave us on the floor of the House and the Senate earlier this week as they certified the Electoral College votes is ridiculous, but it's par for the course. All of a sudden, they're all history students, and they just love and have such a deep passion for our Constitution. Yet somehow, they are able to trample upon it and shred it every single day. Now, you figure that one out. These people are out of control, but you have to have legitimate reasons to put these people on notice, and God knows they give us enough legitimate reasons every single day. Doing it strictly from a political standpoint based off of conspiracy theories, where even the President of the United States is like, well, when it comes to the Secretary of State with the state of Georgia, just give me one more vote to beat Joe Biden, even though I won the state. So it's not as if he was saying, I want all of the votes counted and just let the chips fall where they may. No, it wasn't even concerned. Just wanted one extra vote. Okay, that pretty much tells you all you need to know in conjunction with everything else that's been going on. His lunatic lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, coming out there and telling people, oh, it's trial by combat. Give me a break. Again, how much money did they raise? $200 million in their legal fund? Come on, where did all that money go? Is it all accounted for? This is why people will make statements like they have been over the past couple of months, because they're getting paid. They don't care. They're not your friend. They're not sitting down with you at dinner. They're not asking you out to lunch. They're not sending you Christmas cards. These people don't care about you. If they can run away with $50 million, $100 million, sayonara, see you later, sucker. What don't you get? This is who these people are. Left, right, it's all of them. Fraud, abuse, corruption, nepotism. It's just the story of the day. I mean, it's ridiculous. The media, the hypocrisy. My goodness, you watch CNN, the hypocrisy. They'll point to Fox News and look at what they've said all this time, and now look at what they're saying. And Fox News does the same thing to CNN and MSNBC. They're all hypocrites. They're all hypocrites. Sean Hannity's out there, oh, yeah, it was bad what happened, but you have to remember, folks, it was just a small minority of these people who were rioters who did the wrong thing. Remember that. Just a small minority. He didn't say that with respect to the Black Lives Matter marches and protests. Didn't say that. If you were in any type of radius of those people, or anybody around somebody claiming to be Antifa, well, they were all domestic terrorists. They were all criminals. They were all rioters. When you flip the station, CNN says, well, they're mainly all peaceful protests. protesters. Not too much to see here as there's fire burning behind them, buildings burning to the ground behind them. And now what do you have now? Oop, flipped. Completely flipped. And yet people keep turning on this channel, listening to these buffoons. How many times do I have to say it? These people make 6, 7-figure salaries, depending on who you're listening to read that teleprompter. They are going to read whatever is put on there, whether they're the ones writing it, or it's a producer, or it's somebody higher up the chain. They're going to read it. You know why? Because they're not having dinner with you. They're not inviting you to lunch. They're not sending you Christmas cards. These people don't care about you. They're making their money. They're riding the coattails of whoever they got to kiss butt to, and that's it. This is our society. This is what our country has come to. And people are frustrated and they're upset, and it's all connected. If the economy was strong, if the economy was booming, we wouldn't have these types of events unfolding and taking place. But the economy's crumbling. Our politics is crumbling. If we had a strong economy, it would probably be because we have strong policy. Well, we don't have strong policy. We have pathetic, ridiculous policy, and we have a pathetic and ridiculous economy. Wouldn't have to be storming Washington, D.C. if we had sound policies, but we don't. Again, another legitimate reason to put these people on notice. It's disgusting. It's sickening. It's disgraceful. And it's going to get worse. Twitter permanently suspends Donald Trump's accounts. Apple and Google, I believe, are suspending or removing from their platforms, from having the ability to download the app, the Parler or Parlay app, however it's pronounced. We've been talking about this, basically a Twitter, if you will, for conservatives. And I stated this months ago when this really started gaining traction, how dangerous this was going to be. Because now everybody who's already on one side of the boat, who already thinks one way, it's just going to be an echo chamber on the Parler app, on the Parler platform. Perfectly fine for Parler to exist and to start a business. Perfectly fine. If you don't like Twitter, start your own. But what did I say how dangerous this was? How many times do we have to have a podcast or a discussion about social media? The pitfalls, the dangers of it. From former executives and developers themselves. How concerned they are. The genie's out of the bottle. Pandora's opened the box. Everything's flown out of it and it ain't coming back in. Lies spread around the world before the truth even gets out of the gate. Photoshop. Make stuff up. Put somebody's picture up there and then put a quote over their face and everybody thinks, well, look, there's a picture. It's on the internet. It must be true. That person must have said that quote. All starting to make sense? Why everything's in decline or in decay? Why this stuff is crumbling? And when you have opportunists who we're now seeing, like a Ted Cruz and a Josh Hawley, they figure, look, this idiot Donald Trump can convince these people to do all this stuff, and he's a buffoon. I'm smart. I'm Harvard and Yale educated. Got a law degree. Did this, did that. Donald Trump can make these people jump. Guess what I can do? I can make them sing and dance. That's what they're thinking. This is blind ambition. I will not trust Ted Cruz. Not that I cared for him or trusted him before. But Josh Hawley, he's new to the scene. But now he's shown himself, as far as I'm concerned, can't trust him. Shouldn't trust any of them. But now this is really somebody you should not trust. Same thing like a Kamala Harris. Guided and motivated by blind ambition. The woman didn't have a plan. She wanted to be the leader of the free world. She got decimated on the debate stage. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have policy. She doesn't know what she's doing. But she wanted power. Now she's a heartbeat away from being the most powerful person in the world. Quite a scary thought, isn't it? What else do we have? So that is something. Now you can, of course, have your thoughts on whether it's right for Twitter to suspend Donald Trump and others, whether it's right for Apple and Google to remove Parler from their platforms and from their software. You can have at it. I mean, at the end of the day, these are private companies. These are their businesses. They have their rules. They can make their decisions. And if you don't like it, don't use their services and start your own. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. But because big tech is so powerful, because these platforms have become so powerful and part of everyday life, people start to think, well, that's just too much power in their hands. So now it's going to be an interesting story to see how the Democrats, because they have the power of the government right now, what they do. Do they try to rein them in? Do they try to bust them? What's going to happen? These are going to be some controversial policy discussions, I imagine, coming down the pike throughout this year. And then we have to, of course, ask ourselves, how are people going to respond to this too? Even more importantly, perhaps, especially now in this era of heightened tensions, especially after what just took place on Wednesday. And then we have inauguration 11 days from now, 12 days from now. Are people going to be even more upset that they're being shut down, that they can't speak to each other? So is this going to be more divisive, or is this actually going to calm things down? Well, we're going to find out. Trump not showing up, I think, again, that was a mistake, but it's not surprising. It'll be interesting to see if he gives a farewell address to the country, too. That'll be something. That's basically another tradition from the Oval Office behind the Resolute desk for an outgoing president to sit there and give his farewell address. So it'll be something to see, and who knows what he's going to say there. Again, hopefully it's presidential. Hopefully it's trying to keep everything and everybody calm. But, you know, they call it mob and mob rule for a reason. You don't control them. Cat's out of the bag. Does he really have the power to put them back in? Some people, maybe. All of them, no. No, all of them, no. Some people they see red, and that is it. They're frustrated. They're depressed. They're out of work. They got health issues. They've been in lockdown for COVID. Anything can trigger people. There's crazy people all across the country on drugs, legal and illegal. It doesn't take much for somebody to snap, especially if somebody, the president and others, are pushing buttons. Doesn't take much. I told you this was going to come to this country. I hoped and prayed that I was wrong, but here it is. And I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to get much worse before it gets better. So we are definitely on the downslide. But we shall see what happens. Market performance, and then we'll get to the December jobs report. So the dollar index is trading higher, back at a 90 handle, 90.07, and some broader weakness against some of those major currency pairs, again, with the dollar strengthening against the euro, the pound, pretty much across the entire board. Wall Street making new all-time highs once again. Why not? A dismal jobs report. Bad news is great news for Wall Street. These people do not care. Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 0.2%. The S&P 500 gained 0.5%. The NASDAQ 100 gained 1.3% for the day. In a sea of green across the pond in Europe, but nothing too drastic. On the share price front, we have Apple gaining 0.9%. Tesla putting on an additional 7.8%, now trading at $880 an ounce, $880 a share. And 2 more days of this, it's $1,000 a share. So, I mean, why not? Bubble, anybody? Bubble? Microsoft gained 0.6%, as did Amazon, and Facebook was a slight loser, giving back 0.4%. On the commodity front, despite the dollar strengthening, WTI put on a gain of 2.8%, trading at $52.24. Brent put on 3.33%, $56.22 a barrel. Natural gas is at $2.69. Gold and silver got whacked today, I guess off of the back of a strengthening dollar. Nonetheless, as far as I'm concerned, these are buying opportunities. And of course, I don't know if you heard, but Deutsche Bank received a deferred prosecution agreement, and they were fined $100 million. That seems pretty small, doesn't it? $100 million compared to what we've been talking about. Why? Drumroll, please. For manipulating and rigging the precious metals market. Now, you do that, you're going to jail. They get to pay a fine. with shareholder money, with bailout money, with the money that they made from rigging the market, nobody goes to jail and they get a deferred prosecution agreement. Ain't it grand? Gold is trading at $1,848 an ounce. Silver at $25.42 an ounce. Those are spot prices. And to round it out, Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 1.12%. So there you have it. Continue to keep you monitored. As far as I'm concerned, these are the early innings of a long-term bull market in commodities and precious metals. Any type of pullback is an opportunity to accumulate. Do your homework. So now on to the employment situation for December 2020. Total non-farm payroll employment declined by 140,000 in December, and the unemployment rate was unchanged at 6.7%. The decline in payroll employment reflects the recent increase in coronavirus cases and efforts to contain the pandemic. That, to me, is just an excuse. In December, job losses in leisure and hospitality and in private education were partially offset by gains in professional and business services, retail trade, and construction. On to the household survey data. In December, both the unemployment rate at 6.7% and the number of unemployed persons at 10.7 million were unchanged. Although both measures are much lower than their April highs, they are nearly twice their pre-pandemic levels in February, 3.5% and 5.7 million, respectively. Among the major worker groups, the unemployment rates for teenagers at 16% and Hispanics 9.3% increased in the month of December. The jobless rates for adult men at 6.4%, adult women 6.3%, whites 6% even, blacks 9.9%, and Asians at 5.9% showed little change. Among the unemployed, the number of persons on temporary layoff increased by 277,000 in December to 3 million. This measure is down considerably from the high of 18 million in April, but is 2.3 million higher than in February. The number of permanent job losers declined by 348,000 to 3.4 million in December, but is up by 2.1 million since February. So that's in the right direction. That's something we like to look at. So they're saying permanent job losers declined by 348,000, is now sitting at 3.4. So that is generally in the right direction. Hopefully that is sustained. The number of unemployed reentrants increased by 282,000 to 2.3 million over the month, 452,000 higher than in February. In the month of December, the number of persons jobless less than 5 weeks increased by 449,000 to 2.9 million, while the number of persons jobless 15 to 26 weeks declined by 303,000 to 1.6 million. The number of long-term unemployed, those jobless for 27 weeks or more, at 4 million was essentially unchanged in December, but has increased by 2.8 million since February. The number of those jobless for 27 weeks or more accounted for 37.1% of total unemployed in December. That is not a good figure there, folks, as we'll see later as well. The labor force participation rate and the employment population ratio were both unchanged over the month at 61.5% and 57.4% respectively. These measures are up from their recent high. These measures are up from their recent April lows, but are lower than in February by 1.8 percentage points and 3.7 percentage points respectively. The number of persons employed part-time for economic reasons at 6.2 million decreased by 471,000 over the month. This measure is down from its April high of 10.9 million, but is 1.8 million higher than the February level. These individuals who would have preferred full-time work were working part-time because their hours had been reduced or they were unable to find full-time jobs. In December, the number of persons not in the labor force who currently want a job at 7.3 million was little changed over the month, but is 2.3 million higher than in February. These individuals were not counted as unemployed because they were not actively looking for work during the last 4 weeks or were unavailable to take a job. So let's get this straight. They're telling us at the beginning of this there's 10.7 million, and then we have 7.3 who are not in the labor force, but they do want a job. So they are able and willing to work, but because they haven't looked for work, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not count them. So 10.7 and 7 plus 7.3 is 18 million. You got it? And that does not include those who have been unemployed for longer than a year, because those people are just completely ignored altogether. So when we look at our initial jobless claims analysis and discussion that we do here weekly, typically on Thursday, it's no surprise when we see that figure standing at 19, 20 million. That makes sense. That starts to jive, doesn't it? But that's nowhere near a 6.7% unemployment rate. Among those not in the labor force who currently want a job, the number of persons marginally attached to the labor force at 2.2 million changed little in December, but is up by 749,000 since February. These individuals wanted and were available for work and had looked for a job sometime in the prior 12 months, but had not looked for work in the 4 weeks preceding the survey. The number of discouraged workers, a subset of the marginally attached, who believed that no jobs were available for them, was essentially unchanged at 663,000 in December, but is up by 262,000 since February. Let me see here. This is supplemental data. Do we want to talk about this right now? Persons reported they were unable. Yeah, I'll read this as well. So this is the supplemental data here. In December, 23.7% of employed persons teleworked because of the coronavirus pandemic, up from 21.8% in November. These data refer to employed persons who teleworked or worked at home for pay at some point in the last 4 weeks, specifically because of the pandemic. So that's interesting that that number continues to trend higher. That is still going to have, I think, some major ripple effects on the commercial real estate market, especially if this trend continues and is maintained. So something to keep an eye on. And of course, we've been discussing this here for months. In December, 15.8 million persons reported that they had been unable to work because their employer closed or lost business due to the pandemic. That is, they did not work at all or worked fewer hours at some point in the last 4 weeks due to the pandemic. Let me repeat that first sentence there, at least part of it. In December, 15.8 million persons reported that they had been unable to work because their employer closed or lost business due to the pandemic. This is far from over, folks. This is why we continue to see heartbreaking figures every week with respect to initial jobless claims. This measure is 1 million higher than in November. Way wrong direction. Among those who reported in December that they were unable to work because of pandemic-related closures or lost businesses, 12.8% received at least some pay from their employer for the hours not worked, little change from November. Among those not in the labor force in December, 4.6 million persons were prevented from looking for work due to the pandemic. This measure is up from 3.9 million in November, so an additional 700,000. Not good at all. To be counted as unemployed, by definition, individuals must be either actively looking for work or on temporary layoff. Okay, that's that. Now we're on to the establishment survey data. Total non-farm payroll employment declined by 140,000 in December. Employment declines in leisure and hospitality, private education, and government were partially offset by gains in professional and business services, retail trade, construction, and transportation and warehousing. In December, non-farm employment was below its February level by 9.8 million or 6.5%. In December, employment in leisure and hospitality declined by 498,000, with 3/4 of the decrease in food services and drinking places, losing 372,000. Employment also fell in the amusements, gambling, and recreation industry, down 92,000, and in the accommodation industry, losing 24,000. Since February, employment in leisure and hospitality is down by 3.9 million or 23.2%. So a lot of this is most definitely tied to further lockdowns and restrictions, what have you, basically putting these people and their lives and their livelihoods on a yo-yo string. It's just going back and forth here. People cannot live like this. It's putting a ton of stress and strain on the system and, more importantly, on these people and their families. Employment in private education decreased by 63,000 in December. Employment in the industry is down by 450,000 since February. Government employment declined by 45,000 in December. Employment in the component of local government that excludes education declined by 32,000. In state government, education lost 20,000 jobs. Federal government employment increased, of course it did, by 6,000. Since February, government employment overall is still down by 1.3 million. Other services lost 22,000 jobs in December, with over half of the loss in personal and laundry services, down 12,000. Employment in the other services industry is down by 453,000 since February. And of course, a lot of that is going to be tied to those previous job losses in leisure and hospitality and what have you. In December, employment in professional and business services increased by 161,000, with a large gain in temporary help services, gaining 68,000. Job growth also occurred in computer systems design and related services, up 20,000. Other professional and technical services gaining 11,000. Management of companies and enterprises also up 11,000, and businesses support services gaining 7,000. Employment in professional and business services is down by 858,000 since February. Retail trade added 121,000 jobs in the month of December, with nearly half of the growth occurring in the component of general merchandise stores. That includes warehouse clubs and supercenters, gaining 59,000. Job gains also occurred in non-store retailers, gaining 14,000. Automobile dealers up 13,000. Health and personal care stores gaining 10,000. And food and beverage stores gaining 8,000. Employment in retail trade is 411,000 lower than in February. It'll be interesting to see how well these jobs can be maintained. We hope that they are, but of course, a lot of the seasonal shopping with the holidays, so we'll see if these are really temporary or if they've proved to be full-time and sustainable. Construction added 51,000 jobs in December, but employment in the industry is 226,000 below its February level. In December, employment rose in residential specialty trade contractors, up 14,000, and residential building gaining 9,000, two industries that have gained back the jobs lost in March and April. That's a good thing. In December, employment also increased in non-residential specialty trade contractors, up 18,000, and in heavy and civil engineering construction gaining 15,000. Just a couple more paragraphs to go, but there is some other supplemental stuff that I do want to address before we sign off for the weekend. Employment in transportation and warehousing rose by 47,000 in December, largely in couriers and messengers, up 37,000, while employment in transportation and warehousing overall is 89,000 lower than in February. Employment in couriers and messengers has increased by 222,000 over the same period. In December, employment also grew in warehousing and storage, 8,000, and in truck transportation gaining 7,000, while transit and ground passenger transportation lost 9,000. In December, healthcare added 39,000 jobs. Employment growth in hospitals gained 32,000, and ambulatory healthcare services gained 21,000, was partially offset by declines in nursing care facilities, losing 6,000, and community care facilities for the elderly, also losing 5,000. Healthcare employment is 502,000 lower than in February. In December, manufacturing employment increased by 38,000, with gains in motor vehicles and parts gaining 7,000, plastics and rubbers products also gaining 7,000, and non-metallic mineral products gaining 6,000. By contrast, miscellaneous non-durable goods manufacturing lost 11,000 jobs over the month. Despite gains over the past 8 months, employment in manufacturing is 543,000 below its February level. Wholesale trade employment rose by 25,000 in December, but is down by 251,000 since February. In December, job gains occurred in durable goods, gaining 11,000, and non-durable goods also gaining 11,000. In December, employment changed little in other major industries, including mining, information, and financial activities. In December, average hourly earnings for all employees on private non-farm payrolls increased by 23 cents to $29.81. Average hourly earnings of private sector production and non-supervisory employees increased by 20 cents to $25.09. These increases largely reflect the disproportionate number of lower-paid workers in the leisure and hospitality who went off payrolls, which put upward pressure on the average hourly earnings estimate, which is why I wish they would also give us the median numbers as well. The change in total non-farm payroll employment for October was revised up by 44,000 from 610,000 to 654,000, and the change from November was revised upward by 91,000 from 245,000 to 336,000. With these revisions, employment in October and November combined was 135,000 more than previously reported. Monthly revisions result from additional reports received, yada, yada, yada. Okay, let's see. Some other supplemental stuff that they put in here because they did some further year-end adjustments. So here's a note that they put in at the end of the report. Upcoming changes to household survey data. Effective with the release of the employment situation for January 2021 on February 5th of 2021, new population controls will be used in the household survey estimation process. These new controls reflect the annual update of the intercensus population estimates by the U.S. Census Bureau. In accordance with usual practice, historical data will not be revised to incorporate the new controls. Consequently, household survey data for January of 2021 will not be directly comparable with data for December 2020 or earlier periods. Ain't that great? A table showing the effects of the new controls on the major labor force series will be included in the January 2021 news release. In addition, the population controls for veterans, which are derived from a Department of Veterans Affairs population model and are updated periodically, will also be updated with the release of the January data. Then we also have upcoming revisions to the establishment survey data. Effective with the release of the employment situation for January 2021 on February 5th of this year, the establishment survey will revise non-farm payroll employment, hours, and earnings data to reflect the annual benchmark process and updated seasonal adjustment factors. Not seasonally adjusted data beginning with April 2019 and seasonally adjusted data beginning with January of 2016 are subject to revision. So going all the way back to January of 2016. Consistent with the standard practice, additional historical data may be revised as a result of the benchmark process. So that's interesting. This is a long report here. This is longer than usual. There's some other stuff here that they are noting, and I do want to share this with you as well. I think it might be worth noting as I take a look at it here. Revisions of seasonally adjusted household survey data. At the end of each calendar year, BLS routinely updates the seasonal adjustment factors for the National Labor Force Series derived from the household survey. As a result of this process, seasonally adjusted data for January of 2016 through November of 2020 were subject to revision. We have a Table A. I will go over that briefly. Table A shows the unemployment rates for January 2020 through November of 2020 as first published and as revised. The rates changed by 0.1 of a percentage point in 3 of the 11 months and were unchanged in the remaining 8 months. Revised seasonally adjusted data for other major labor force series beginning in December of 2019 appear in Table B. So when you look at Table A, seasonally adjusted unemployment rates in 2020, as it just noted, very little change, which is somewhat interesting to me because we have been told on a monthly basis, basically since March and April, that due to the pandemic and due to the lower response rate and all that stuff, that typically, if we were given a number, 6.8%, officially they would write at the end in the fine print, well, it should really be, instead of 6.8%, it should be 7% or 7.1%. Here, there's virtually no change. The other interesting factor here that they have, we have the civilian labor force in December of 2019 was at 164,579,000. As it stands with December 2020, again, the civilian labor force at 160,567,000. So basically a loss of 4 million. That's a doozy. And then they calculate everything else to give us an unemployment rate of 6.7%. Again, that doesn't take into consideration those 7.3 million who would qualify to be unemployed, but they don't fall into the definition because they haven't looked for work. And then, of course, those who have been unemployed for longer than a year aren't even considered at all. So If you just looked at that, I mean, here's the other thing. With the civilian labor force at 160 million. So if you looked at that number and then you went and you looked at the report of the initial jobless claims figure, their denominator is like 143 million. So they're even playing with different numbers here. But nonetheless, we are somewhere with a more realistic rate, 11.2%, 11% to 13.5%, not 6.7. Not 6.7 at all. So this was not a happy report by any stretch of the imagination. Some of the good news in here, of course, was anybody that was able to find work, and the permanent job losers decreased. Hopefully that trend sustains itself. I remain skeptical, but we shall see. So that is it. The first full week, I guess, here in 2021 is behind us. It's going to be a doozy for the next couple of weeks for sure, and I imagine for the rest of the year and beyond. But there you have it, DC Circus and Job Pain. Enjoy your weekend. I'll be back on Monday. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.